Is LSU about to do it to us again?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On this loaded episode, do want to talk about the biggest Miami Hurricanes football wins of all time. Kind of hoping we can get a couple of those this coming season. We're going to need them, which is going to bring us to what it's going to take for Miami to try and close out another top 5 recruiting class, because I know this has been a tough stretch, but still a long way to go, my friends. And I want to start from a recruiting standpoint on readjusting our expectations for the next Miami target, who's going to be announcing tomorrow night. Because, guys, when we had Larry Bluestein on yesterday afternoon, I mentioned that Chad Simmons, director of recruiting from On3 Sports, on Thursday morning, had dropped an RPM prediction, a crystal ball for Miami to land 4-star cornerback Jaboree Antoine. And Antoine tomorrow night, he's going to have now 2 hats on his table, and it's going to be LSU and it's going to be Miami. Now, less than a month ago, Antoine decommitted from LSU, but now the trends are saying he's probably going to recommit to the Tigers. So again, I want to adjust everyone's expectations. And it seems that these trends have really started to shift dramatically back in LSU's favor ever since the Tigers landed DJ Pickett on Wednesday night. And of course, Pickett was another big-time Miami target and will continue to be a big-time Miami target until National Signing Day, because until he puts pen to paper, none of this is over yet. But LSU got the verbal commitment from Pickett, and Tigers defensive backs coach Corey Raymond, who's an excellent recruiter, not as much when he was at Florida, because apparently Florida's hopeless, but at LSU, the guy is almost unbeatable. Corey Raymond is on a hot streak. So the word is, and a lot of this is coming from LSU insiders, and some of the national insiders are starting to come around on this as well. The word is that as soon as LSU secured a yes from DJ Pickett, which we now believe happened about 2 days before he announced, so around Monday, as soon as they got that yes from Pickett, LSU started to really shift their focus and shift their love right back over to Jaboree Antoine, that they want to lock up another elite corner to play with the elite corner in Pickett that they just landed. And I would guess, because we know alphas tend to gravitate towards alphas, maybe Antoine has some desire to play together with DJ Pickett. LSU, of course, historically known as DBU. They're putting the band back together there. So, and maybe, by the way, if LSU had not been making Antoine feel the love for a while, that might be the reason why he decommitted from LSU in late June, and why they're trying to secure that back. And obviously he is a New Iberia, Louisiana native, which is right in LSU's backyard. Again, and as we've learned in recruiting, it can be good sometimes, it can be bad. These trends can shift within a matter of days or a matter of hours, but telling you about, 36 or so hours before Jaboree Antoine announces his verbal commitment, most of the buzz is now back and the trends back in LSU's favor. So we'll see if Miami can change that narrative. But this could end up being a really, really, really good week at DB for LSU, and a very disappointing week for Miami given the standards that have been set. And here's the bottom line: as we march closer, we've still got a marathon in front of us towards National Signing Day on December 20th. And in Miami's case, Miami, they've already landed a really good group of DBs: Stubbs, Ewald, Wallace, Merritt. They're not finished yet, but if we want to close with an elite class of cornerbacks, Miami's going to have to win on the field this fall. if you want to convince a DJ Pickett to stay closer to home, to add to his family legacy, you've got to show him that Miami is a program that can achieve greatness on the field. And it starts with that Florida game on August 31st. And that's not just for DJ Pickett. That's for dozens of other recruits out there that want to see how Miami looks this fall. Miami has a roster right now that appears capable of winning double-digit games. They've done a tremendous job, as we know, in the last couple recruiting cycles. They've done a bang-up job in the transfer portal. You basically transformed your offense by adding Cam Ward and adding Damian Martinez to a really good offensive line Miami already had. Go out there and show you can win double-digit games, and things are going to turn around. Now, we are going to be answering questions from you guys, from the Locked On Canes Insiders. If you want to become a Locked On Canes Insider, click that link in the show description below. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours and vice versa. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We get one from our guy BP, who says, hey, when will our staff, Miami staff, learn to not put out recruiting taglines like 10 days of madness, to only set themselves up for failure and then fall on their face, resembling quote unquote watch the finish from a few years back, he says. BP, to your point, 10 days of madness right now is looking more like 10 days of sadness. That's the sort of week we've been having. And again, it's not over, obviously, with Jaboree Antoine, but of course on Wednesday, Miami missed out on DJ Pickett. And then we didn't talk about it as much this week because I wasn't expecting to win this one, but Jarquez Carter, the defensive lineman, picked Ohio State last night. So we had kind of gotten the scoop about 2 weeks ago from our recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, that OSU was really trending with Carter. So that was an expected L, but an expected L is still an L. And then you got Jaboree Antoine announcing tomorrow, Vernell Brown announcing the following day. Most people expect the 4-star receiver Brown to pick Florida. So is Miami about, now we did land Dalen Upshaw, so let's not pretend we didn't land anybody, but is Miami about to go, 1 for 4 during these 10 days of madness? Now, to the defense of the staff, BP, when they talked about 10 days of madness, they did not promise 10 days of commits. All they promised was madness. Would you not say these past, 8 out of 10 days, this has been madness, right? So you may have taken it to say, hey, we're going to land all these commits. All that they promised was madness, and we're getting madness. So they weren't technically wrong about that, because we've had roller coasters, we've had suspense, we've had disappointments. It's been that sort of week, unfortunately, in the not so good way, when we were all hoping it was going to be in the good way. But yeah, I think there is something to your point in trying to avoid, over promising and under delivering. But hey, I don't know, at the time that the 10 days of madness started, maybe there was a real expectation that DJ Pickett was going to be a Cane, and that would have made this all feel worth it. But yeah, it's obviously been closer to 10 days of sadness than madness, or 10 days of big mad rather than 10 days of madness. So it's been a tough one. But I do want to say something here, and I'm not putting this directly on BP, the guy who asked the question. In fact, BP, I've known him for a couple of years, and he's a rational fan. So, I think his question was maybe a little bit of a troll, which is fine. But I do want to say to a lot of Miami fans out there, because I get tons of social media comments, I get tons of text messages, and I can see the tone from some of you. Can you guys please stop crying for a second? Because some of our fans, some Miami Hurricanes football fans, are Charmin soft, even if Miami's on a not so good 10-day stretch right now. How short are your memories? Less than 3 weeks ago, Miami had a run right around July 4th of landing Gavin Nix, Hilton Drake Stubbs, S.J. Alofa-Tuli, some of the most important recruits in this class. About a week before that, they land Chris Ewald, one of the most important recruits in this class. So, okay, Miami had a hot stretch. Now Miami's having a cold stretch. We're going to have more hot stretches before this class is done. So some of you need to put your big boy pants on, because this is how recruiting works in the big leagues. You don't literally land everybody. Even Georgia's missing out on some players right now. Well, let me ask you this question. For those of you who are already freaking out and acting like this is the recruiting apocalypse and it's over, let me ask you a question. Is National Signing Day, is that on July 19th? No. National Signing Day is on December 20th. you don't need to flip out until the marathon is over, because that's what it is. You're acting like 10 days of madness was some 10-day sprint to decide the recruit. This is more than a 10-day of madness. This is a marathon. Like I see people talking like Mario Cristobal suddenly can't recruit. This man has worked miracles on the trail the past 2 cycles. This guy turned a 5-7 season into a top 10 recruiting class. He turned a 7-6 season into a top 5 recruiting class. That's water into wine type of results that he's getting out there. And now I see people are saying that, oh, recruits clearly don't respect our new DB's coach. The same one who just landed the number 5 safety in the class, Hilton Stubbs. The same one who beat Georgia for Chris Ewald. We got some knee-jerk reactions out here. Like, some of you just need to relax. You have to understand that the actual games are starting in less than a month and a half, and I can't wait for that. Maybe some of you will step off this ledge, and guess what? Whatever recruit, and by the way, Miami has a top 10 class right now, so it's not as if they're in the 40s or something, but the recruiting is not over until December 20th when these players put pen to paper. You're probably going to get some flips. You may lose some guys. You're going to gain some guys, but please, please stop crying until we get closer to December 20th. We're going to answer more of you guys' questions on the other side, including will Miami's defensive line or will Miami's cornerback recruiting end up resembling last year's defensive line saga, which turned out very well? We got a good question about conference realignment. We got a good question about what Miami's biggest wins in history have been. So, folks, we are only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. And I'm only getting started on the Game Time app. Guys, this is the only ticket app that I use because I'm getting amazing deals, and I'm getting amazing deals last minute, okay? I might go out to watch the Marlins and the Mets tonight. You know why? Because Game Time right now, folks, I can get $2 tickets to the game tonight. $2 tickets. Even with parking, that's cheaper than taking my family to the movies. So I'm going to get some $2 tickets for the Marlins tonight. They even have $1 tickets for the game against the Mets coming up on Monday. And folks, on the Game Time app, the deals actually get better the closer you get to the first pitch or the first kick. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Guys, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this Friday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your second listen today, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. I co-host that show with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We have a really good time talking about the conference, and we're going to be on the road next week. I'll be in Charlotte for ACC Media Days, so we'll be bringing you content from out there. We get oh, by the way, I want to answer this. This has come from a bunch of people who want to know about the jersey number changes. Because with the new transfers that have come in after spring football, some of the new freshmen who have come in. I'm not going to run through the entire roster for jersey number changes, but there are a couple of highlights that stand out to me. Mark Fletcher, who was wearing 22 last year at running back, he's moving to his old high school number of number 4. He seems very excited about that. I'm happy for him. So Fletcher wears 4 now on offense. Ruben Bain switched from 44 to 4 on defense. You can have double numbers as long as it's on either side of the football. And, you know, when Fletcher put out an X post the other day about being back, I think some people assumed he was like talking about his health. Hopefully both things are true. But when he talked about being like number 4 being back, I think he was talking about switching the jersey number. But still, I have optimism about Mark Fletcher's health. We interviewed him about 3 weeks ago on this program. It seems like his recovery is going very well. So fingers crossed, we're going to see Fletcher in that backfield with Damian Martinez come August 31st against Florida. Fletcher's back to the number 4. Damian Martinez, by the way, just transferred in from Oregon State. He is at his preferred jersey number 6. Now, he had to get that number 6 from Josiah Trader. So Josiah Trader has switched from number 6 to number 0. So now number 0 on offense is JoJo Trader. Number 0 on defense is Mish Powell. And now Damian Martinez has his, that's kind of his brand. He's always worn the number 6. He's got the number 6 at Miami. And another new number update. I think he didn't have a number in spring because he was injured during spring. But Armando Blunt, our guy, true freshman defensive lineman, he's now got the number 19. He has put that on his social media. So those are some of the highlights for Miami's jersey number changes. And it's funny because, like, I don't really care what number you wear. Just go out there and play. But just based on the bombardment of questions I've gotten about jersey numbers, I take it you guys care. Like, you guys care a lot more about the jersey number and the way the uniforms look than I do. I don't care what you wear as long as you go out there and win games. But I wanted to give you some of the updated jersey numbers because we've been getting a lot of questions about it. We get a question from the Giant Ninja who says, hey, I'm getting vibes from last year on how our defensive line run went downhill fast around this time. And yes, remember, last year around this time, you thought, oh, maybe we'll land Justin Scott. He chooses Ohio State. Maybe we'll land Kamarian Franklin. He chose Ole Miss, right? We missed out on a bunch of guys, and Armando Blunt was at Miami. Then he flipped to Florida State before flipping back to Miami. Justin Scott, of course, ends up flipping to Miami. So, yeah, the way that this defensive back recruiting is going with DJ Pickett. And now, again, the Jaboree Antoine thing is not finished yet. Like, I'm not going to completely rule out Miami, but the trends have been going in LSU's favor. So it does remind you of that, right? Because at this time last year, we thought, man, we were promised this amazing defensive line class and nobody's coming. What did I say about the marathon? And Miami wasn't even that good last year on the field. I think they'll be a lot better this year, despite the fact that, like, Miami was just okay on the field last year. They were able to turn it around with a lot of those defensive line recruits. I'm hoping that happens with defensive back recruits. So thank you for the history lesson. Because, again, some of you guys have such short memories that you go through, 10 days of frustration. You're like, this is terrible. We can't recruit. Nobody knows what they're doing. Relax. It's going to be fine. We get a question from 818 Callie Kane, who says, hey, what's your outlook on recruiting if we go 11-1 or 10-2 this season for the rest of the 2025 cycle and going forward? He says, in terms of where we will be ranked and if we will start actually landing more 5 stars like UGA and OS Who. And also, what do you think happens if we go 8-4 or 7-5? If Miami goes 10-2 or 11-1, I think they can finish with a top 5 class. I think you'll be, and by the way, I know DJ Pickett just committing to LSU is a blow. Obviously, Miami will of course try to flip him before it's all over. We'll see what happens, but 5-star defensive lineman Jose Epinesa he's still undecided, and there have been some trends pointing him towards Miami. I don't rule Miami out with 5-star wide receiver Jamie French. I know the Hurricane, he's a bit of a wild card. I don't know what he's going to decide. I think August 30th he decides, but Miami is very much in the mix there. And guess what? There's over a month left in that recruitment. We've seen a lot can happen in a couple days, couple hours. A lot can happen in 40 or so days left before French decides. But yeah, I think if Miami has an 11-1 type of season, I think they're going to, it's too easy for this staff, because this staff recruits well when they're not good. When they are good, you're going to be turning kids away. Like, honestly. Now, if Miami has like another 7-5 type of season, I think if you have that type of a season for a third year in a row, and it would be a really big disappointment. I think for this roster and for this schedule, 7-5 would feel like 5-7, and it would be very tough. Like, it would be very tough. Knowing Cristobal, even if they go 7-5, they'd probably still finish with like a top 20 class. But I don't think, if you don't get good results on the field, like if you don't get at least 9 wins this year, then I don't. It's going to be a lot harder. Like the third year, it's going to be harder to close a really good class through smoke and mirrors, right? Your first 2 years, you're selling players on the future. It's harder to sell players on the future the third year. You have to start selling the present. So, it's going to be tough. If you go 7-5 this year, you'll probably still have a good recruiting class because these coaches are so good at what they do on the trail. But yeah, it wouldn't be nearly as good as what you could get if you went on the field. We get a question from, I don't know who this is from. He says, hey, how much does this generation of kids desire to have an opportunity to compete versus being given a role or committing to a particular program. He says it appears the Canes make it known that everyone must earn everything they get as it should be. Honestly, it's different for every recruit, right? There are some players who say, I want to go somewhere I can play right away. There are others who say, I want to be part of the tradition for a certain program, and I love the environment, I love the culture, and I'm willing to go out there and compete. I know that people like to paint it in a way now that every high school recruit now is a diva, and they care more about social media and NIL than they care about football. I mean, I guess it's true for some kids, but there are still plenty of real ones out there. And I like the fact that Miami tries to gravitate towards the real ones, to the guys who actually, really care about football and don't mind competing. But the thing is, like, I think the whole competing thing, I think that more affects the transfer portal, because sometimes you'll get players out of high school who just want to be part of your program. But then after a year or two, if they're not getting on the field, which, that might be their fault, or it just might be too much competition, they'll go take their talent somewhere that they can play. So I think that to me, that's a bigger factor on roster retention than it is on recruiting. I don't think recruiting has changed as much, but a year or two down the road, if a player feels like, I can go somewhere else and get on the field, they might do that. And they have that right now. You don't have to sit out if you transfer. You can transfer as many times as you want. It's the wild, wild west out there. Let's see. We get all right. I want to talk on the other side. We get questions about other Miami Hurricanes defensive back targets like Ben Hanks Jr., like Bryce Fitzgerald, the safety out of Columbus. So you want to keep it locked right here, folks. We're nowhere near done on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. So again, we're taking questions on this episode from our Locked On Canes Insiders chat. If you want to join, you can try it free for 14 days. Click the link below, get text messages directly from my phone to yours, one-on-one questions and answers. I give you guys show updates and recruiting scoops on there. And yes, I know a lot of our recruiting information on there has been all over the road over the last couple weeks, because this 10 days of madness, it's been very unpredictable. So we apologize that some of the Donno balls have been smashed over the last couple weeks, but we have a good time on there regardless on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. We get a question that asks, hey, please tell us about Ben Hanks Jr. That's the 4-star cornerback out of Miami Booker T. What do we need to do to get him? They say. Have you seen his highlights? The dude is like a hawk with interceptions. I think last year he had 11 INTs alone. We absolutely have to do everything to get this kid. I think Miami is doing pretty much everything to get Ben Hanks, and I would imagine that after missing out on Pickett and if they miss out on Jaboree Antoine tomorrow, they're only going to intensify their efforts on Hanks being really their top remaining blue chip target at that position. To give you an example on how highly Miami staff thinks of Hanks, if you guys watched our episode or listened to our episode yesterday with Larry Bluestein, Blue told me this story on air. He told me off air a couple times as well, that during one of these camps that Ben Hanks was involved in, and Miami staff, a certain Miami staffer was watching Ben Hanks play, and he told Larry Bluestein, that's the type of player right there that you win championships with. That's how highly Miami thinks of Ben Hanks Jr. And like under normal circumstances, I would say, hey, Miami would probably have a really big lead with Hanks. But the elephant in the room is the fact that Hanks is a Gators legacy and that his father played there. And so I'm sure that pulls on the heartstrings. So Hanks is one of the top local South Florida players. Miami's all over him, but Florida is all over him. And the legacy ties are going to make it complicated. Like I've even seen some Florida analysts say like Miami's in a really good spot for him, but nobody's ruling out Florida because of the family ties. So once we get closer, and I don't think he has an announcement scheduled yet. So this could play out for a couple more months. Once we get closer to his decision, I think we'll have a better idea. And listen, if Miami wants to do something to make Hanks's decision a little bit easier, go out there and kick Florida's butt on August 31st. I'm sure if those are his top two, I'm sure that would go a long way toward giving Miami the edge. We get a question from our guy, Pat Mack, who's all over. He's an everydayer. Pat Mack is ever present. He says, hey, what's your favorite Canes football game ever? And which is the most important? He says, for him, the answer to both is the victory over UCLA that knocked them out of the national championship. Yeah, that was in 1998, and that game was rescheduled for one of those hurricanes we got. And so that was like right before UCLA would have played in the national championship. And Miami Miami put up 600 plus yards. They beat them 48-45. It was crazy. So obviously, like, that game was significant in a negative way for UCLA, but that was a game that really showed you, like, Miami's back. Miami's coming back. That was under Butch Davis a couple of years before they became, the powerhouse that they were for the 2001-02 season. So I could probably agree with you on that being the most important. I will also say that the first national championship win over Nebraska in the Orange Bowl, 1983, that's got to be up there as one of the all-time pillars for Miami Hurricanes football. As far as my favorite games, I was at the Dorsey to Shockey game, 2000 win against Florida State, wide right 3. I think that was in the whole wide right sequence. That was an unbelievable game, and it was like 1,000 degrees at the old Orange Bowl Stadium for that one. That was huge. And also, like, to go more recent, and again, I know that this obviously was not, didn't end up being one of the great Miami teams of all time, but they did start 10-0, and they ended up, number 2 for a short time in the college football playoff ranking. That game at Hard Rock Stadium against Notre Dame, where they just shellacked the Crying Irish. Like, I was at that game, and I know for anybody out there who's like, they can never, ever get a good crowd at that rented stadium. Like, obviously, crowds like that have been few and far between, but that showed you when Miami's good, when Miami's relevant, that's what a Miami crowd could look like, because that Notre Dame crowd, for anyone who was at that game, that rivaled any atmosphere we've had at home in Miami history, right? For as great as the Orange Bowl was, and I miss that building so much, that night at Hard Rock Stadium, that was as good as any atmosphere I've ever had watching Canes football, and it was one of the best atmospheres in college football in recent years. So that was one of my favorite games as well. I was also at the Brock Berlin comeback game against Florida at the Orange Bowl, where seeing those Gator fans crying when they left the stadium, oh, that was incredible. Well, let's make them cry again in a little over a month, guys. So those are some of my favorite games. We get a question from, I think this is David C., who says, hey, any update on safety Bryce Fitzgerald from Columbus High School? He has a commitment date set for August 16th. He asks, is Miami still the favorite? Now, to be honest, we're still almost 3 weeks away from his decision, but I haven't gotten the sense that Miami is the favorite to land Fitzgerald. I know that they're still in the mix. So are Florida State and Florida. Now, if you look at his On3 profile page, the Hurricanes are considered the trending favorite there. Those automated trends are not always correct. But I'm wondering, and of course, the Columbus connection, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal are Columbus alums. Hopefully now maybe Miami turns up the heat for Fitzgerald after missing out on some other players. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't gotten the sense that they're in the lead there. But that could potentially change if they shift their priorities there. So thank you for the question, David. We get a question from Tom from Houston, who says, hey, let's assume Miami makes it to the ACC championship game. Who do you think they'd see based on the schedules? Honestly, obviously, like the smart, like if Miami can get to the ACC championship game, of course, the smart money for who they would face would be either Clemson or Florida State, because those appear to be the best teams in the conference. But I'll tell you, based on the schedules, I've looked through the schedules of like any of the top 5 or 6 teams in the ACC, and I think NC State probably has the easiest schedule, and they've got a good football team. Like the only decent team that they face is Clemson. Like, they don't play Miami or Florida State this year, and so the rest of the conference schedule should be manageable. NC State, whether they're good or bad, they beat North Carolina every year. That's a one-sided rivalry for them lately. So if you're just going by the schedules, I think NC State's a pretty good football team, and they've got a cake schedule compared to Miami's got a pretty easy schedule, but NC State's is easier than Miami's schedule. It's easier than Clemson, and it's easier than Florida State's schedule. So that would be a team that I would watch out for. We get a question about conference realignment that says, hey, are there any rumors or news about Notre Dame for conference realignment? Do they feel they will remain independent for the foreseeable future? On Notre Dame, the sense that I get is, yes, I think they're still rocking and rolling with their independent status. I think the most of a commitment you might see from Notre Dame is, I have seen some rumors, and for what it's worth, because everybody's got their takes for clickbait on conference realignment. A lot of these rumors are, you take them with a grain of salt, but there's definitely been some buzz for Notre Dame maybe creating a scheduling alliance with the Big Ten, perhaps. Like they currently have a scheduling alliance with the ACC. And if they were to change that to the Big Ten, that would benefit probably Notre Dame. It would benefit the Big Ten. It would hurt the ACC a little bit. But I think maybe changing their scheduling alliance would be the farther that they go. I don't think they're going to join a conference in the foreseeable future. And this person adds a comment. They say, hey, if I'm the Big Ten, landing Notre Dame, Miami, and UNC makes them the best conference. They would have the strongest football histories, best TV markets, academic standing, etc. Yeah, because something you mentioned, all those schools, Notre Dame included, if they were to join a conference, Miami's got AAU status. North Carolina does as well. It's a fine institution. Like, these are programs that not only have some, athletic prestige, but are, better academically than somebody on my X account used this term, which I think is hilarious. I think he was referring to Florida State. It's a little mean, but he referred to them as a diploma factory. Yeah, Miami's not a diploma factory. There are a few of those. They just show up, and in 4 years, we'll give you a diploma. We'll send you on your way, or sometimes less than 4 years, if you take some extra summer classes and stuff. But yeah, I thought that was hilarious. All right, we got a couple more questions we didn't have time to get to. We will get to them in the near future. Now, let me add this. As much as I do not feel optimistic right now for Miami landing Jaboree Antoine, I will be on vacation tomorrow. So that might give us a shot, because you guys know when Donno goes on a trip, Miami's hit rate is 1,000% on recruiting. Something's going to happen. So I'm actually I'm going up to the ACC media days, which start on Monday in Charlotte. But my family wanted to come with me, and we're doing a road trip. So we're going to stay in St. Augustine, Florida for a day, which is like sort of halfway up there to Charlotte. Close to halfway. We're going to stop in St. Augustine for a day. Then we're going to drive all the way up to Charlotte. Then on the way back, we're going to stop in Orlando. So we're doing a whole family/work vacation. So I will be in a hotel in St. Augustine tomorrow. Hopefully I'm not in the hotel. I'm walking around somewhere drinking from the fountain of youth. But I will be on vacation when Jaboree Antoine decides tomorrow. So if they can't land him with the aid of a Donno vacation, then it wasn't meant to be. We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.